Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are taking on a source stack that is less a collection of articles and more a psychological deep tissue massage.
That's a good way to put it.
We are diving into an incredibly dense, intense narrative that pulls together college athletics, corporate shadow organizations, stalking, and just profound hidden trauma.
It's a world where the stakes are, they're life and death, and the violence is so intensely personal. We've been handed the intimate blueprint of two interconnected lives.
Right.
You've got Violet Winters, a college student whose chief goal in life is to be utterly invisible. And then on the other side, Jude Callahan, a figure of, tremendous public prestige, hockey god, who was secretly the heir to a massive pharmaceutical empire.
And a trained weapon.
And a trained weapon of controlled violence.
Exactly.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really unpack the mechanics of their dynamic. How does the accidental witnessing of a brutal, cold-blooded murder spiral into Jude's relentless, merciless, and frankly, terrifying obsession with Violet? And crucially, we have to follow that obsession down into the darkest roots of their respective family legacies. Because what's on the surface isn't the real story.
Not at all. It reveals a truth that is far more shocking than the surface-level revenge plot suggests.
Yeah.
We are tracing the path from toxic obsession to, strangely, a dark, complex form of redemption.
Before we jump in, though, we absolutely have to issue a clear content warning. The sources we are analyzing are heavy. Really heavy.
Yeah.
They deal explicitly with themes including prolonged child abuse, deep-seated emotional trauma, suicidal ideation, graphic violence, murder, stalking, and specific non-consensual kinks.
Right, particularly CNC and somnophilia, which the sources frame as critical elements of the character's toxic relationship development.
And we just want to be clear, we are reporting on this content impartially and objectively, focusing only on the context that's provided in the sources. We're not endorsing any of it.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start where Violet's world begins, Stantonville. The sources paint this picture of a small, rundown town in the Northeast,
whose entire cultural identity, its very breathing, is dictated by an overt obsession with ice hockey. It's everything.
Everything.
Exactly. Stanton River College, SRC, is ground zero for this obsession. The local team, the Stanton Wolves, are worshipped like gods. Their stars are minor deities.
Then you have Violet, who exists in, the negative space of this world.
Oh, totally. Her reality is just defined by exhaustion. She works these punishing, lengthy shifts at Haven, which is the main local sports bar. She's constantly fighting chronic back pain, sleep deprivation, and just the pervasive smells of cheap alcohol and, potential violence.
And her goal is simple.
Yeah.
Achieve zero visibility. The sources detail how this isn't just a quirky personality trait.
No, not all.
It's a deeply ingrained survival mechanism.
It is. Her past is just this cycle of instability, poverty, and intense verbal and emotional abuse from her single mother. So to survive that, Violet learned to disappear.
She adopted an external uniform of invisibility.
A literal uniform, a hoodie, thick-framed, non-prescription glasses. It's a conscious effort to just blur herself into the background.
And Stantonville itself is a rough place.
Yeah.
The sources mention gangs, drug activity, police corruption. The authorities are totally unreliable.
And her mother's mantra is just echoing in her mind, "Don't let me hear you breathing, Violet. If you lay low and shut your trap, you won't get into trouble."
That deep, toxic conditioning is the single most important piece of information we have about her.
It is.
Because it dictates her reaction to the trigger event. When she witnesses the brutal murder of Susie Callahan, she does the only thing her trauma taught her to do.
She froze.
She froze, pretends she saw absolutely nothing.
Tried to erase it from her own history. But the sources immediately established that this is impossible. Susie Callahan wasn't some anonymous victim.
She was the mother of Jude Callahan.
Exactly. And when Violet eventually realizes who that man is, the sheer scale of the danger she's in just clicks into this horrifying place. She is now the target of cold-blooded, meticulously planned revenge by one of the most powerful and ruthless people in the entire region.
And the initial pursuit, as the sources detail it, is just a masterclass in psychological menace.
Absolutely. For over a month, Violet is just under observation. Jude is described as sporadically following her, always lurking in the shadows, usually on his bike with the helmet visor down.
And when she went to the police?
Dismissed completely. They called it paranoia, which is a perfect example of how the wealthy and powerful can operate with total impunity in a corrupt town like Stantonville.
The escalating terror hits a breaking point in this alley confrontation. Violet is walking home, passing through this stench of piss reeking alongside the walls.
Ugh.
When she's cornered and assaulted by a drunken man named Dave, he grabs her, traps her against the wall.
And her survival mechanism, that freeze response, just kicks in and paralyzes her. She even notes that her mother had effectively stripped her of the ability to even scream for help.
And this is the moment Jude chooses to intervene. But his intervention is not a rescue.
No, it is a declaration of ownership.
Yeah. He arrives on his bike and just unleashes this brutal, calculated assault on Dave, driving his gloved fist into the man's face over and over again, crushing bones.
It's horrific. And what's crucial is that Violet begs him to stop. She's whispering, "You'll kill him." But Jude, soaked in the blood of the man he just beat, stops only to pivot his entire volcanic rage directly onto her.
This is where that psychological tension becomes magnetic. Jude tells her, "I already let him go," confirming he stopped just short of murder. And
Then he immediately demands thanks for saving her life. But the demand is wrapped in these vicious insults and condescending commentary about her character.
how do the sources even justify this contradiction? He just risked exposure and arrest to defend her, only to turn around and call her annoying and boring.
And that she would have let him violate her due to her meek, entirely washed up and boring personality.
It's so cruel.
It's a classic manifestation of controlling behavior, masking his own underlying trauma. Internally, the sources reveal Jude's true motivation, and it has nothing to do with saving her life.
What was it?
He thinks to himself, "I couldn't just stand by and let another man play with my toy, only I get to break her."
So she's property.
She's property. She's an object directly tied to his need for revenge. The protection isn't for her benefit at all, it's to secure his instrument of vengeance. He sees her trauma, her meekness, not as vulnerability, but as a weakness that he is uniquely entitled to exploit and eventually shatter.
This capacity for immediate, controlled, and intensely violent action demands that we look deeper into Jude's background. I mean, he is a college hockey star, but that's just the veneer. What is the architecture of his violence?
It starts with the Vipers Brotherhood. And this isn't just some college clique. It's a tightly knit group bound by shared trauma and very dark secrets.
And his closest friends and teammates are integral to this. Kane Davenport and Preston Armstrong.
Right, and the sources reveal they share this formative trauma, the murder of an abusive teacher back in boarding school when they were just boys.
Wow.
And that established this foundation of loyalty and shared complicity in violence that defines their adult relationships.
We learn that Jude confirms this violence isn't impulsive.
Yeah.
He grapples with constant, powerful, violentless urges, and he manages them by maintaining a meticulous list of targets.
And Kane, who's the most rational of the group, operates as the logistician. He researches targets, provides the files for Jude's executions.
So when Kane asks Jude if Violet is next on this list,
Jude is very clear. He has a different plan for her than his previous targets, who, he confirms in this chilling fashion, are buried 6 feet under.
so this implies the psychological warfare he intends to wage on Violet is a more prolonged and destructive process than just simple elimination.
Oh, much more.
Now, let's talk about the source of Jude's training and his ability to compartmentalize the corporate infrastructure. Jude is the heir to the Callahan pharmaceutical empire, controlled by his ruthless father, Regis Callahan. But how does this connect to Vencor? What exactly is Vencor?
Vencor is the key. It's not just a shadow organization. It is the violent, privatized, and highly effective muscle of the Callahan empire. It's the component dedicated to industrial espionage, corporate espionage, and the elimination of any and all threats.
And Jude's entire youth.
Was a forced, brutal training program for Vencor. He was subjected to systematic physical abuse. The sources say fists, boots, words, designed specifically to strip him of all emotion and mold him into a perfect, weaponized killer, ready to take over the operational role of the organization.
And the sources include this particularly horrific detail about Regis's methods of control. Jude resisted the conditioning.
He did, but after his mother overdosed on sleeping pills, Regis realized he could ensure Jude's compliance by threatening his mother's life and status.
So he used his own wife as leverage against his son.
Yes. Regis forced Jude to comply, even forcing him to witness or carry out the torture of his mother's friend, all while calling Jude an ungrateful cretin. This process turned Jude into the Callahan Empire's perfect robot and the spare to Julian's genius.
So Jude's obsession with Violet is layered. It's the trauma of his Vencor conditioning, the rage over his mother's death, and his need to assert control over the one person who saw the moment his foundation crumbled.
She's a lightning rod for all his suppressed rage and lifelong emotional abuse.
And that sets the stage for the escalation, moving from external stalking to the deep violation of Violet's sanctuary and the intense psychological warfare that follows.
The transition from lurking to invasion is swift and terrifying. Jude moves from watching Violet at Haven, which caused her to drop a glass in sheer terror,
Right, when she recognizes him.
to violating the only place she felt safe, her apartment.
This action is so crucial because it includes the first documented instance of Jude engaging in behaviors related to somnophilia, entering her shared apartment while she and her sister Dahlia are sleeping.
He doesn't inflict physical harm, but he leaves this chilling marker of his absolute control, a sticky note placed directly in her journal.
And the message is direct, yet almost formal. Abandon an useless touch about escaping me. Don't act stupid and force me to show you what I'm truly capable of.
It shows premeditation, calculation, and a chilling literacy regarding her inner life.
Because he didn't just read her escape plan, he read her soul. He confirms he read her entire journal where she detailed her struggles with suicidal thoughts, her deep-seated trauma, and the low self-esteem rooted in her mother's relentless verbal abuse.
All those names she was called useless, leech, mistake.
That knowledge is his ultimate weapon.
It is. He now understands her deepest insecurities. And later, he ambushes her in the kitchen, locking the door and demanding his thanks for saving her life in the alley. He corners her against the counter, initiating the forced intimacy that the sources define through the lens of those non-consensual kinks.
Okay, let's analyze the extreme psychological mechanism at play here, given the content warning and the context of CNC that the source material evokes. He pushes her against the counter and engages in this forced, violent intimacy.
And he slides his gloved finger, the same hand he used to crush Dave's bones, inside her mouth until she chokes, then pulls it out and tastes her sweet fucking taste.
It's an act of pure domination. But the sources also detail Violet's complex and deeply disturbing reaction. Initially, she flinches, driven by fear.
But later she has this profound reflection that this intense, violent, non-consensual act was the first real pleasure she had ever experienced, and that darker fantasies were awakened within her.
Why? Why does a victim of profound abuse register this terrifying domination as pleasure? What analytical takeaway does the source material offer us about complex trauma and self-worth?
This is the crux of the dark psychological dynamic. Violet spent her entire life trying to be invisible, believing herself to be worthless and a mistake, as her mother constantly affirmed.
So she had no value.
Zero value. And Jude, in this violent moment, sees her, targets her, and desires her with a frightening intensity. For someone who believes they are nothing, being violently, intensely desired by a force of nature is a form of validation, a twisted sense of being worth the attention and control.
It confirms that she's important enough to be broken by someone powerful.
Exactly. And Jude, in his own warped way, feeds this validation. He connects her current, meek personality directly back to her mother's abuse, stating, "It's not your fault. Your mother was a deplorable human being."
Which is this bizarre validation that chips away at her core, self-blaming narrative far more effectively than any kind words could have.
And crucially, throughout this entire violation, Violet's main focus remains her sister, Dahlia, a med student at SRC. She is her lifeline.
So the fear that Jude might hurt Dahlia prevents Violet from fighting back or exposing him.
It reinforces her self-sacrificing role and her willingness to absorb Jude's wrath to protect her only remaining family member.
As intense as Jude's obsession is, the sources quickly pivot to show that he isn't the only threat. And he might not even be the mastermind. We're introduced to Mario.
Jude's pseudo-stalker and bodyguard.
Right, who is secretly following Violet for Jude's protection.
The external threat becomes brutally real when Violet is nearly run over by a speeding black van. Mario shoves her out of the way, taking a gunshot wound to the arm that was intended for her.
And Mario, as he's bleeding out, provides this crucial warning that destabilizes the whole initial revenge plot. He says, "You should be more worried about why professional killers shot at you."
And more chillingly, he warns her that Jude would kill him if he left her unprotected. This just contradicts everything Jude has been projecting. It suggests the existence of a far larger, more organized threat operating in the shadows.
And this threat is revealed to be Jude's older brother, Julian Callahan.
The intellectual counterpart to Jude's muscle. He's the pioneer of the Callahan medical-industrial complex, defined by his pretentious philosophical nonsense, and Julian reveals this staggering conspiracy related to her near-death experience.
So what was the scope of Julian's manipulation? How did it tie into the Callahan Empire's medical arm?
Julian explains that the assassination attempt wasn't Jude, it was him. Julian, through his extensive research tied to the family's pharmaceutical interests, found Violet's blood tests to be extremely promising.
So he orchestrated the whole
This
thing.
whole thing, he subjected her to an experimental coma-inducing drug. He orchestrated the chaos just to secure her compliance.
So this wasn't an organic coma. This was a drug with a 50% chance of her never waking up. Why?
He essentially wanted her blood and her body as a test subject. He offers Violet and Dahlia a new start and financial stability in exchange for her silence and cooperation with his research.
And he leverages the fear and danger created by the Black Van attack, which he himself orchestrated, to force her into his control.
Yes, and he frames Jude as the sole culprit in her suffering, maintaining a perfect layer of plausible deniability to his younger, more violent brother. The sources are very clear. Julian is manipulating both siblings simultaneously.
The tragedy of this section is Mario. He's critically injured, potentially with severe brain damage, and remains in a coma. And Violet, fueled by the trauma instilled by her mother, immediately internalizes this.
Yes, she believes she is a curse who brings misfortune to everyone she cares about, which directly reinforces the lie her mother created.
So Julian's scheme not only endangered her life, but severely damaged her primary emotional protector, Mario, and confirmed Violet's deepest fear about herself.
He's revealed to be the true, cold-blooded puppet master, far more dangerous than Jude's raw aggression.
This brings us to the moment where Jude's obsession, surprisingly, becomes the vehicle for her rescue. Jude's actions, though driven by this possessive rage, were based on a lie. When he recognizes Julian's machinations, his entire foundation just collapses.
Jude notices these inconsistencies, strange nervous system reflexes in Violet that don't fit a standard coma diagnosis. He immediately suspects Julian, knowing his brother's tendency toward, medical experimentation.
So he uses the power of the Callahan name, breaks hospital security, and basically kidnaps Violet, taking her to a secure house.
And the doctor he forces to examine her confirms his suspicion. She was never in a true coma. It was a drug-induced one designed for Julian's experimentation.
This realization of his brother's betrayal is the first crack in Jude's rigidly controlled world.
But the true foundation of his life is about to be systematically dismantled by his father, Regis, and Julian in a terrifying dinner reveal.
The sources dedicate a lot of time to this dinner scene.
They have to, because it just obliterates Jude's entire motive for the last 5 years. He was operating under the foundational belief that his mother, Susie Callahan, was murdered, and Violet was a witness tied to that event.
But the truth, delivered by Julian and Regis, is that Susie committed suicide.
And Julian produces the evidence, a suicide note written in a mix of frantic cursive and print.
What were the specific devastating details in that note that just shattered Jude's memory of his mother?
Well, the note detailed Susie's lifelong struggle with severe mental illness, a complexity Jude had been completely shielded from. But most brutally, she expressed hatred for Jude, specifically because he had survived when her other babies had died through stillbirths and miscarriages.
Oh my God.
She confessed her deep fear that her illness would compel her to hurt or even kill him.
And Regis, Jude's father, just layered on the trauma, revealing that he had spent years documenting Susie's attempts to drown, suffocate, and poison Jude.
He claimed he was forced to monitor her 24/7, watching her through security footage, just to protect his son. Which explains why Regis manufactured the murder story, to solidify Jude's dependence on the Venkor-Callahan structure and turn his rage into controllable, directed vengeance.
The analytical takeaway here is profound. Jude's foundational revenge quest was not about avenging a loved one. It was based on a manufactured lie designed to maintain corporate and familial power.
And Violet, the witness to this staged murder, became an obsessive fixation, symbolizing both the manufactured trauma and, as we learn next, the first brief moment of true kindness Jude ever experienced.
Right, let's transition to the Blue Umbrella flashback. Jude realizes that Violet isn't just the witness, but a figure from his deep past. How did Violet accidentally save Jude years before the murder?
The flashback is stunning in its detail. Years prior, Jude was bloodied and exhausted after a brutal Venkor training trial. He was physically and psychologically just destroyed.
And the sources describe him sitting on the street.
When Violet, the same girl, though younger, approached him, she gave him 2 simple things, a blue umbrella and a chocolate caramel protein bar, and she whispered, "Stay strong."
That moment, which he refers to as a single patch of orange in the bleak landscape of his life, gave him hope. Hope that he could survive his father and Venkor for his mother.
And the resultant scar from the beating he covered with a tattoo of a barren tree, a constant secret memorial to that moment of kindness.
So when he saw her in the alley, he recognized her.
He recognized her, which explains his protective yet proprietary intervention. His obsession wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming the one figure of pure, untainted kindness who existed in his memory and linking her violently to the mother he thought was murdered. The irony is just excruciating.
As Jude processes the lie of his mother's death, the external danger surrounding Violet continues, and this time, the cost is the life of one of the Viper's brotherhood.
The Viper structure, though violent, relied on Jude and Kane stabilizing Preston Armstrong. He struggled acutely with bipolar disorder, violence, and depressive episodes. They were constantly covering for him.
And Preston's loyalty to them and his connection to Violet became his death sentence.
He visits Violet for a picnic, and during this seemingly innocuous moment, he notices a slim gold bracelet she wears, inherited from her mother, Savannah. This small detail is the thread that unravels the entire second major family conspiracy.
What's on the bracelet?
It's ornate. It opens to reveal a crescent moon and sun symbol identical to the ring worn by his own family. It bears the initials WJ,
Winston James Armstrong.
Winston James Armstrong. Preston realizes that Violet's mother, Savannah, had a deep connection to his family's powerful legacy. And before he can even articulate the realization, a hitman shoots him.
And Preston dies instantly in front of Violet.
She is, yet again, a witness, screaming over the body of the one friend who had shown her purely genuine kindness. The trauma is compounded by the fact that the death seems entirely senseless.
Until the funeral.
At Preston's funeral, the atmosphere is just toxic with power and grief. Lawrence Armstrong, Preston's father, and Marcus Osborne immediately confront Violet. Lawrence confiscates the bracelet, confirming its provenance. It belonged to his father, Winston James Armstrong, the patriarch of the Armstrong family.
The sources detail the dramatic reading of Preston's will at the opulence of the Armstrong mansion. This is where the conspiracy just explodes into the open.
Preston, in his will, explicitly names Violet and notes that her freaking eyes seemed familiar to him, strongly suggesting a blood connection.
And the ultimate truth is revealed.
Violet's mother, Savannah, who Marguerite, the grandmother, viciously referred to as a rat and Grady whore, had Violet with Winston James Armstrong.
So Violet is Winston's illegitimate daughter.
Making her a direct, if unwanted, heir to the Armstrong legacy.
And the killer's motive is equally rooted in corporate and legacy protection. Marguerite Armstrong, Winston's wife and Preston's grandmother, confessed to hiring the hitman Saul,
who was on the Armstrong payroll,
to eliminate Violet. Why? Because Marguerite believed Violet was continuing her mother's cursed legacy as a parasite and a threat to the family fortune. Preston was killed because he intervened to save Violet.
So the cost of maintaining the secrecy of power here is now 2 murders. Susie Callahan's fabricated murder leading to Jude's toxic pursuit, and now Preston's actual murder to cover the Armstrong paternity secret.
The emotional fallout is immediate and explosive. Lawrence, horrified that his mother murdered his son, disavows Marguerite.
But the vengeance doesn't stop with family disavowal. The sources detail the brutal murder of Marguerite by Marcus Osborne.
Marcus, whose connection to Preston seems tied to this deep grief and uncontrolled rage, hunts down and violently executes Marguerite.
And Jude and Kane, who were staking her out likely to secure Violet's safety, arrive immediately afterward to clean up the gruesome scene. They recognize that Marcus is operating in this feral, mourning state, driven by a deep, uncontrolled rage that even the Vipers can't manage.
The cycle of violence stemming from family secrets continues unabated.
But now, the immediate external threats against Violet have been neutralized, paving the way for the resolution and rebuilding phase.
It's an incredible pivot. The central threats, Julian, Regis, and Marguerite, are either exposed, neutralized, or dealing with the immediate consequences of their own actions. We now move into how a relationship born in toxic obsession and fueled by violence somehow becomes an engine for emotional healing.
Violet, just battered by the deaths of Mario and Preston, she succumbs to that trauma narrative instilled by her mother. She's convinced she is a curse who brings only misfortune, so she runs away.
And Jude finds her. He confirms her paternity as Winston Armstrong's daughter and begins this long, difficult process of regrounding her.
How do the sources detail the specific mechanism of her healing? I mean, what changes were necessary beyond just knowing her true parentage for Violet to break the curse her mother imposed?
The sources emphasize the critical role of therapy. Violet begins seeing Sloane Harriet, a top-tier therapist, who systematically helps her address the core trauma. She starts recognizing that the abuse, the assault attempts, and the verbal violence
Inflicted by her mother, her foster father, even clients at Haven.
were not her fault. And that shift from internal blame to external acknowledgement is the beginning of her self-acceptance.
And this internal change is immediately reflected externally. She stops actively trying to be invisible. She sheds the thick-framed glasses, begins wearing feminine, bright clothing.
And crucially, starts speaking her mind. She challenges Jude and stands up for her own needs and opinions.
The dynamic with Jude evolves from controller control to something far more complex and codependent, yet functionally healing. Violet realizes that Jude, the man who terrified her and violated her, provided a unique kind of safe space.
How so?
He accepted her darkness. He looked into her trauma without judging her. She reflects that his consistent, albeit toxic devotion helped her turn her deep self-hate into self-acceptance.
She tells him that Jude never called her the names her mother did, and that he looked at her like I was the most precious person in the world.
Which is where the analysis of trauma bonding is so critical. For Violet, who never received unconditional love, the intense proprietary attention from Jude, backed by his immense power, rewired her self-perception. He didn't diminish her. He claimed her importance.
The deep dive analysis confirms that this relationship, while founded on stalking and trauma, ironically became the catalyst for both characters to face their pasts.
Right. Jude finally accepts the complicated truth of his mother's mental illness, releasing him from the impossible burden of avenging a fabricated murder.
And Violet accepts her self-worth, allowing her to break the generational cycle of self-blame that killed Preston and injured Mario.
So, what does this new state mean for the future of their relationship, particularly in light of the symbol that started it all?
The blue umbrella.
The blue umbrella is the ultimate symbol of their destiny. Jude finally confesses that he was the bloodied, traumatized man she helped all those years ago. The sources emphasize that the umbrella and the protein bar were the singular patch of orange that enabled him to endure Vencor's relentless training.
And the way this memory is integrated into their new life is fascinating. The memory is physically marked by his barren tree tattoo. But
Now he becomes the devoted, constant, and generous client of Violet's new online embroidery shop under the umbrella.
commissioning custom pieces featuring the blue umbrella.
Exactly. The initial pure kindness of Violet becomes the foundation of their future identity.
This symbolic resolution is mirrored by a physical miracle that finally shatters Violet's sense of being a curse.
Jude reveals that Mario survived and is waking up from his coma. And this is the positive counterpoint to Preston's death, proving to Violet that she does not solely bring misfortune or death to those who care for her.
With the external threats managed, the final decision belongs to Violet. She chooses to stay with Jude, fully rejecting the lure of the Armstrong family fortune and legacy.
She prioritizes her healing, focusing on building her own life, growing the embroidery shop, volunteering, and pursuing a future career in social work.
This decision is a profound rejection of the systems that created their trauma, the Callahan corporate machine and the Armstrong legacy.
And Jude commits to protecting her from both empires and helping her build the stable, healthy family structure she never had. Their shared future is one built not on traditional romance, but on a deep, shared understanding of trauma and a commitment to protecting the fragile peace they've created.
This has been an exhausting yet deeply insightful journey into the shadows of power and obsession.
We've uncovered several core knowledge nuggets today. First, we saw precisely how deep-seated family legacies, the Callahans, the Armstrongs, and the shadowy Vencor, can fuel relentless violence.
Lies, manufactured by patriarchs like Regis and Julian, were used as operational tools to manipulate their own children.
Turning them into weapons to protect corporate interests.
Second, the journey of Violet and Jude highlights the astonishing psychological complexity of obsession. While originating in toxic rage, the obsession became the catalyst for self-discovery. Jude's terrifying attention was the necessary force that compelled Violet, a lifelong victim, to finally confront and dismantle the trauma of self-blame and invisibility.
And finally, the necessity of therapeutic intervention and self-acknowledgement is paramount. Violet's meticulous journaling, her detailed documentation of her trauma, which Jude initially used as a weapon, ultimately became the map for her own psychological freedom, allowing her to fully break the cycle her mother imposed.
The sources meticulously detail how easily power structures, Regis, Julian, Marguerite, manipulated the lives of those below them by twisting truth and exploiting emotional vulnerabilities. Considering the sheer amount of death, severe violence, and coercion necessary to maintain the secrecy and operations of these empires and the shadowy organization Venkor across 2 generations, we have to ask one final provocative question.
Okay.
Venkor's power is built on silence, violence, and the control of heirs like Jude. If the next generation, Violet and Jude, choose to actively reject the fortune and the violence, what is the ultimate fate of a powerful clandestine entity like Venkor once its core muscle decides to stop fighting its secret wars? And what kind of personal power must they possess to truly escape an organization designed to control them from birth?
A powerful thought to consider, especially given the history of the Callahan family's deep involvement. Thank you for diving deep with us.